The Mishnah tells us in Pirkei Avos, Basar Mamoros Nivra Olam, the world was created with 10 utterances of God. But God could have created the world with one utterance. God could have said, let it all be. But yet there were 10 utterances. Why 10, not one? To punish the evil who do not adhere and behave properly, and they cause the world that was created with 10 utterances to be compromised, and to give reward to the devoutly righteous who maintain the world that were created with 10 utterances. So the simple understanding of the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos is difficult. And God created that he wants to give more, that the devoutly righteous should be more deserving. Okay, because God did more to bring it about, so they're maintaining something which is more special. But to say he created with 10 to punish the evil who destroy God's world, that's not a reason to want to create with more, so they should be more liable for punishment. So the simple understanding of the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos is difficult. So Maharal of Prague explains it this way. Beautiful, he says a beautiful word. We know numbers. We have individual numbers, then we have units. If you count from 1 to 9, each number is individual and not related to the other number. When you come to 10, although 10 is comprised of 10 ones, but factually 10 is a unit. God holds nobody accountable if there's no way to understand certain things. But so let's say the world would be created with one utterance, with 200s, up to 10. People say, you know something? The world is random. There's nothing that connects anything with anything. But if God created the world with 10 utterances, that means each utterance complements the other because it creates a unit of 10. So the takeaway should be that, you know something? That there's something behind this creation. It was created with an intent. If there's a creator, there was an intent in that creation. There's an objective. So the 10, when it says that the evil are held liable and accountable, of course, their takeaway should have been that there's a creator and there's a purpose. And you can't just dismiss it and say it's random. So the tzaddikim who read it right, they read the script and the narrative right, they understand. If it's 10, that means everything is cohesive. Everything is coalesced. Everything interlocks. It is intermeshed. Therefore, they chose to live their lives specially and continuously to analyze and delve deeper and deeper to understand what exactly is the objective and how to maximize on this existence. The evil, they turned their back on it. But you could have seen it. Therefore, they have greater level of culpability. Now, the world is so vast, and man's eye, relative that what could be seen, we barely see anything. There's so many things in this existence which are not even aware that exists. Even if we're able to see everything on the terrestrial level on the surface. But what about subterranean? What's under the earth? What's in the midst of the earth? What's in heaven? The galaxies, the stars, the planets. Relatively speaking, it's infinite, this existence. So without having a reading, an understanding, or some background, or somebody gives us some insight in what this is about, what is it? It's total confusion. Only today that we have a semblance of understanding of something due to science and due to we're able to see things globally, we have a slight inkling of understanding that there's a symmetry to existence. For instance, we talk about climate change. It was known that when they cut down the forest in the Amazon, in the Amazon jungle, it affected the climate in the world. Because that's the largest forest in the world, in the Amazon jungle. And when they started to remove miles and miles of that timber, it affected the world climate. Why? Because when the world was created, there's a balance. There's a balance in ecology. And the moment you impact it, that balance, there's a consequence. But it's only due to seeing things on a global level do we understand why things are happening, because they did something there, therefore the effect is elsewhere. I'd mentioned the exactness of the human body, the chemical interaction in the body, the brain. If a woman is iodine deficient, she cannot conceive, even to a slightest degree. I told the story. There was this couple, they were married for 20 years, 21 years. They had no children. And it's known there's a segula, meaning it's something which is the equivalent of a good omen, that if you do something, one could merit to have children. What did they do? They adopted a child. Adoption allows one to be worthy that he should be able to have his own child. And they adopted a little girl. And within 6 months of adopting that child, the woman conceived. And she was a woman already in her 40s. And what happened? She went to the doctor. Doctor took a blood test, and he noticed that her iodine level was slightly off. He says, you know something? I'm going to give you an iodine supplement. She took the supplement. That month she conceived. Because that was the reason why she wasn't able to conceive. Meaning the balance is so exact, the way God created this existence, it's not to be believed what makes things happen and what does not allow things to happen. That's the exactness of the balance. And this is one small detail of this relatively infinite existence. The human mind, the field of psychiatry, pharmacology, imbalances, bipolar, all kinds of schizophrenia, whatever it is, that a person functions normally, that his chemical balance is balanced, and therefore he can be a productive person who has control over his existence. It's miraculous. This is all random. It evolved. But yet, there's so many questions we have which are unanswered. Where do you begin? Where does it end? So you have to have something, you have to have that, like we used to say, the inside scoop. What's the inside scoop? That's the question. Now, we have 13 tenets of Jewish faith. One of the tenets of Jewish faith is to believe in prophecy. What is prophecy? Most people don't understand what prophecy is. Prophecy, they say, the one who forecasts the future. That's not a prophet. A prophet is a human being who has a spiritual value and worthiness that God communicates with him. Although he's immortal, God communicates with that mortal. That's prophecy. That's nevuah. And it's one of the 13 tenets of Jewish faith that a Jew has to believe that there is prophecy. In addition to that, one has to believe that Moshe Rabbeinu is Av HaNeviim. He's the father of all prophets, greater than anyone who preceded him, anyone who followed him. There was no prophet as great as Moshe Rabbeinu. So first you must believe in prophecy. Secondly, Moshe is the greatest of all prophets. Why is it so important to believe in prophecy? That's a fundamental in Jewish faith. It's a tenet of Jewish faith. Why? Now, God created this existence. Could you imagine? You have an F-23. Maybe they have more than that. Could you imagine getting into that fighter plane without spending a number of years? Besides being trained to fly, you have to have a certain IQ to be able to understand the manual exactly how that plane functions at various speeds and how to utilize various things in there. Could you get into that plane without having an understanding of how to fly that plane, how to navigate that plane? It's disastrous. Could you imagine we create a laboratory, a $3 trillion laboratory, and you have a person who's a smart person, but he has no idea what the laboratory says. Go and figure it out for yourself. It's absurd. You invest so much money in this sophisticated laboratory, which could bring about phenomenal things, and you tell the person, figure it out yourself. He'll destroy more than he'll accomplish. There'll be no accomplishment. God creates this kind of world. And David says, heaven speaks God's glory. Where's God's glory? Who's God? We don't even know there is a God. So unless God himself somehow communicates with the human being and says, I am the creator, I have a plan of creation, there's certain dictates and certain laws that you must abide by, and you must be responsible to maintain my existence, because otherwise you will destroy it. Because I will so-called withdraw from this existence, which is ultimately destruction. So God has to communicate with us. As I say, finding a needle in a haystack is an understatement to understand what this existence is, unless God communicates with the mortal, with the human being. So therefore, prophecy is a basic tenet and understanding and believing in God. Because if God never ever shared with any human being that he's the creator and he's the one who determines every aspect of this creation, how's the human being, does he even have a chance to have an inkling of what exactly makes this world exist? Therefore, a tenet of Judaism is you believe that there's prophets. Prophet means God communicates with the mortal, with the human being. In addition, Moshe is the greatest of all prophets. That means anybody who contradicts or is in contradiction of Moshe's prophecy, he's a false prophet. Why? I could go toe-to-toe with you, Moshe. You can't go toe-to-toe with Moshe. Because Moshe is the father of all prophets. Because Moshe is the only prophet which God openly communicated in the presence of the whole Jewish people, as Rambam says, and they heard every communication. Moshe, go tell them such and such. Once Moshe was chosen as God's spokesman, now the word of Moshe is the word of God. That was the Sinai event, that every Jew prophesied in a wake state and openly witnessed God speaking to Moshe and having him being his representative to communicate to the Jews what his will is and how we should live our lives. The 5 Chumash, the 5 books of Moses, which we call, because it's Torah Tzivon of Moshe. Moshe, it was the conduit. As we start at the beginning of Pirkei Avos, Moshe Kibul Torah B'Sinai, Masor Yeshua. Moshe received Torah Sinai, he transmitted to Yeshua, Yeshua Liskanim, to the elders, to the prophets, and so on, till the men of the high assembly. But where did it start? Moshe Kibul Torah B'Sinai. That's where it began. That means every word of every one of these 5 books is the word of God. So when the Torah begins, Bereshis bara Elokim, Esa Shamayim V'Soretz. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. In the first word, that already is the giveaway. What is the objective of this creation? Why should God create such a universe? And what is this universe all about? Terrestrial, celestial, subterranean, every aspect of our being and our function. What is it all about? Why? Fulton, the Panama Canal, they called it, Fulton's Folly. When Noah built the ark, they called it Noah's Folly. He was the laughing stock of the whole world, building the ark for 120 years. One room, one stall after another stall. And he's telling the world, if you people don't stop behaving and change your behavior, God will bring a deluge on this world. a flood which will destroy all humanity, everything, and all species. All life will come to an end. So they said to him, Noach, what did you eat this morning and what did you drink afterwards? If there's going to be any destruction, it's coming on you and your family, not on us. And he was the laughing stock of society, but he kept plowing on, interacting, engaging in dialogue. They laughed him off. They pushed him off, ignored him. What exactly is the objective of creation? The first word, Bereshis bara Elokim. What's that base? So Rashi cites the Midrash. The base represents Bishvil Rashis. God created the world for the sake of Torah, which is Rashis, which is the chosen. That's God's perspective, God's way. That's the purpose of creation. This is the playing field. This is the setting for the challenge of, do you observe the Torah? Are you dedicated to the Torah? Or you go in another direction? That's the objective of this existence, every aspect of this existence. And the Shul Yisrael should be gracious. And for the sake of the Jewish people who are identified as the chosen, we the first and foremost. And he cites a verse in Mishlei, we are rashis to us, so we the first of the grain, the 5 grains. What is the most quality grain of all the grains? Wheat is the most quality grain. You have barley, spelt. You have 5 grains, but the oats, but the quality of the quality is the wheat. We are compared to that wheat. Rashis to us so. Now it's very interesting. And what I'm telling you now, it's the Midrash. Rashi citing the Midrash. Torah is called Rashis, the chosen, and the Jewish people are called the chosen because we the Rashis for so, the first of the grain. Now, the Gemara tells us that a person should eat wheat bread in the morning for breakfast. It's called Pas Shachris. It's something which is very beneficial for the human being. Why? So the Maharal of Prague explains, because wheat, according to one opinion, the Eitz Hadas, the tree of knowledge, was the grain, was the wheat. He was not supposed to eat of the wheat. Because why is it wheat? Because a child, when he reaches 6 months old, 6 weeks old, and he's able to begin digesting wheat, this activates the chemical activity in the brain. The intellect of the child starts developing at the age of 6 weeks. Therefore, wheat directly impacts on our intellectual capacity. It activates the various chemical activity in the brain to allow the person to become functional in that capacity. That's Pas Shachris. Now, we find that on the second of Pesach, we bring a communal sacrifice. It's called Korban Omer, the Omer offering. What was the value of the Omer offering? The Omer offering was to permit the new grain to be eaten by the commoners. Any new grain which took root after the Omer offering, which brought, you're not permitted to eat till the next following year when that future Omer offering would be brought. Now, it's a meal offering. All meal offerings in the temple or the Mishkan were made of grain, wheat grain. There were only 2 meal offerings which were made of barley. The Omer offering was barley, and the suspected adulteress, where a woman is forewarned by her husband not to seclude herself with another man, she defies his warning, and she secludes herself with another man. And there's question whether she committed adultery. And she claims her innocence. So the Torah says that part of the process, before we obliterate the rid of the sota into water which she drinks, she has to bring a meal offering. The meal offering is comprised of barley. Why barley? So the Mishnah tells us, of course, barley is animal fodder. It's machol behema. It's machol behema. Her behavior is totally unacceptable. Even if she didn't commit adultery, how does a married woman go and seclude herself with another man, with a husband, forewarned her not to? This behavior is considered irresponsible, unacceptable. Her behavior is like an animal. Therefore, to indicate that, the Torah says her meal offering, even if she's innocent, is animal fodder. It's barley. Now, if you go 50 days later, which is Shavuos, we bring another offering. It's called Shtei Alechem, the 2 loaves of bread, which is a communal offering. It was made of wheat grain. Now, why wheat? So wheat is machal odom. That's the human fare. Human fare is wheat grain. So the Maharal explains, when we left Egypt, at what was the level of our spirituality? We were totally devoid of spirituality. We're at the 49th level of impurity. So relative to who we should have been, because we were devoid, we're the equivalent of an animal. Just as an animal has no relevance to spirituality, we had no relevance to spirituality at that moment. But over that 50-day trek, which on the 50th day, we came to Sinai, and we said we accept unequivocally God's will. We reached the pinnacle of our spirituality, so we became Odom. We became Atem Kruim Odom. Now you've entered in the classification of Adam before he ate of the sin. Before he ate of the tree of knowledge, which was the sin. Now, what's to connote that and to magnify that? What is our communal offering? Wheat. It's made of wheat, which is for human consumption. So we ascended from the animal to the Odom in 50 days. That's the communal offering of the Shtei Alechem, the 2 loaves of bread. The world was created, Bereshis, for the sake of Rashis, the Torah, which is Rashis, Darko. It's the chosen of his way, what he chose, the prescription of life. And the Jews are called Rashis Tfu Aso. We are compared to the wheat, which is the choicest of all grains. Now the question is, why wheat? Because what does wheat identify? With the Odom. Atem Kruim Odom. In the verse of Bereshis, it already tells us who is going to be the equivalent of Adam before the sin. The Jewish people. Atem Kruim Odom, Hem Lo Kruim Odom. You are Rashis to us, so you are the choices of all grains, which is the wheat. Wheat is for human consumption. The ultimate human being is the Jew, because that we were reinstated in the place of Adam to be able to achieve what Adam was meant to achieve in terms of spirituality, spiritualizing this world, and ultimately having that special relation with God. That's the understanding. So the opening word, Torah already tells us what is the objective of this existence. Bereshis, Bara Lokimish. All this existence, heaven and earth, is for the sake of Torah and the sake of the Jewish people. Now, we know that there are many appellations for God, which are unpronounceable appellations. We're only permitted to pronounce those names only in certain contexts. Yud-Kei Vav-Kei is the name of God. Its spelling indicates he's infinite, but the pronunciation is Odom, he's the master. And then we have Elokim. Elokim is the attribute of justice. It says, Bereshis Bora Elokim Eisa Shamayim Yis'oretz. Elokim, which connotes the attribute of justice. So Rashi, in his commentary, cites the famous Midrash that initially God created the world with the attribute of justice. What does justice mean? It's so exacting, and if man is prone to fail, existence will not survive. You have to have the attribute of mercy. So initially, the intent was the attribute, it should be created with the attribute of justice. But because man, the world could not continue, he coalesced, he partnered it with mercy. That's the understanding. Because we find later when it speaks about all the aspects of creations, it says Hashem Elokim. He coalesced Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, which is the attribute of mercy, with Elokim. Now, let's try to understand. Bereshis bara Elokim, God created heaven and earth. What does heaven and earth have to do with the attribute of justice? When you evaluate a person's behavior, is he deserving, undeserving, we speak about justice or mercy. When you're dealing with the inanimate or the unintelligible creature, what does that have to do with the attribute of justice? What is the attribute of justice? The attribute of justice is exactness. You get exactly what you deserve. That is the meaning of Elokim. It's exact. God is exacting. Now, what was the blueprint? You know, you want to build a house. So the architect meets with the client, and the client tells the architect what exactly he wants. He wants so many rooms, he wants this amenity, that amenity, and he tells the architect what his likings and his dislikes are. And so the blueprint is to accommodate the needs of the resident. And based on that blueprint, the residence is built. What is the blueprint for creation? What was the blueprint for creation? So the Midrash tells us, Estakel baraisa borei alma. The blueprint for existence, for creation, was the Torah. The Torah is the blueprint for creation. I'll give you an example. A Sefer Torah, tefillin, or mezuzah. The parchment, the leather, has to come from a kosher species. If it's not kosher, it's a non-kosher species, it doesn't qualify for Sefer Torah, tefillin, or mezuzah. But yet, one of the components, one of the mitzvahs of Torah is tefillin, mezuzah, Sefer Torah. So if that's the case, if God creates species, the species has to have a hide. The species has to chew its cud and have split hooves. Because that, to meet that criteria of which tefillin and the Sefer Torah mezuzah need, you have to have a kosher species. So why did God create a kosher species? So what is the blueprint of existence? The blueprint of existence is the Torah. Why does a human being have the ability to commit murder? Because one of the 10 commandments is thou shalt not commit murder. So therefore, a human being has the ability to take a life of another human being, to end that person's life, to be culpable, to restrain his inclination to take another person's life. Because if it doesn't exist, that negative commandment has no relevance. But that negative commandment is essential to the Torah itself, relating to the spirituality of the Jew. Dietary laws. A Jew is not permitted to violate dietary laws. Why? Because the Torah says, because in terms of your spiritual makeup, your spiritual infrastructure, dietary laws will be detrimental to your spiritual infrastructure. So if that's the case, you have to have kosher species, not kosher species, whether it's fish, whether it's domesticated, undomesticated animals, whether it's insects, whether it's reptiles, all this goes under the category of what? Of dietary laws. What about crossbreeding animals? What about crossbreeding plants? You're not permitted. All these. So every aspect of existence has relevance to the Torah itself. Because the setting, so what is the blueprint? Why is there anything? There's seas, there are rivers, there are wells, there's water. What is it all about? The blueprint, that is essential to the Torah itself. Now, it's very interesting. There's a famous Gemara, which it hasn't happened yet. The Gemara tells us at the end of time, hopefully we're not too far from that moment. after coming of Mashiach, God will sit, whatever this means, with the Sefer Torah in his lap. And he will announce to all the nations of the world, whoever has a share in the Torah should come and take his rightful reward. Who do you think the first nation to come? The Romans. The Romans come and they say to God, this is the moment of truth. We have a very significant stake and share in the Torah. We built marketplaces. We built bathhouses. We waged wars and accumulated enormous amounts of gold and silver. We did all this so the Jews should study Torah. You ever hear such a thing? Sounds like the United Nations. This is the moment of truth. They're talking to God. They understand they're talking to God. I mean, how could you so blatantly lie, unshamedly lie? How do you lie this way? And then the Persians come. So God says, you fools, whatever you did for yourselves. That is nothing. You never did it for the Jews. You built the marketplaces so the prostitutes could stroll and solicit people, and the bathhouses for this and for that. And it's for your own glory. Next group comes in. The Persians. What did you do? The Persians were great architects. We built the water aqueducts. We built bridges. Only for the Jews should study Torah. And every day, one after another, each one leaves as a beaten dog. God throws them out on the head. Every one of them. So the Brisker Rav asks, how's it possible? We're talking about a moment of truth. So if it's a moment of truth, how could they so abashedly lie to God? Our intent is only so the Jews should study Torah. So the Brisker Rav answers, because it's the moment of truth, they will understand why they were able to be victorious, why they were able to do whatever they did. Everything in existence that it's able to happen, it's only because it's Bereshis Bara Elokim, because it's for the sake of Torah, for the sake of the Jewish people. If the blueprint is only because it has relevance to the Jews should be able to study Torah. So if that's the case, only at the end of time do they realize the reason why they were able to accumulate all that wealth, to build the bridges, the marketplaces, the bathhouses, only because that somehow has some relevance to the Jews' existence and their ability to study the Torah. So God says it's true. What relevance does that have to do to you? Your intent was for yourselves. And it wasn't for the sake of the Jews to study Torah. They said, what difference? But factually, we're contributors. God says, no. To have a stake in the world to come in eternity, you have to be invested for the sake of the Torah, which was not your intent. That you're able to succeed, you did for yourselves. And you could only succeed only because it had relevance to Torah. But did you have any relevance to that? The answer is no. But that's all rooted in the first word. Because Bereshis Bara, the blueprint of existence, is the Torah itself. And it can only exist because it has relevance to the Torah. If it has no relevance, it can't exist. And you cannot succeed. The Torah itself, David Bell says, Torah Hashem is Tamima. It's perfect. The Torah is perfect. Shlomo Melech tells us, King Solomon tells us in Proverbs, in Mishlei, Emes Kenev al Timkor. You should acquire truth, do not sell truth. Emes Kenev al Timkor. Now, what is truth? Truth is absolute. If you diminish truth as much as iota, if you take the aleph off the emes, truth in Hebrew is emes, you take the aleph off the mem, tough, what's left? Mess. Death, nothing, worthlessness. Meaning, so what is emes? Truth is exact. It's exactness. So if the purpose of existence was to be the context, the playing field for choice, for all aspects of Torah, so if the Torah is exact, that means there's nothing superfluous in existence, because everything that exists has relevance to the Torah itself. So the world is a reflection of the exactness of the Torah itself. That's Elokim. So the world was created with the attribute of justice, meaning with that exactness. But if you carry that exactness to evaluate man's behavior, man cannot exist. Because since man is prone to fail, as we see clearly, Adam, the day he was created, he ate of the tree of knowledge. He was driven from the Gan Eden. If that's the case, the world doesn't have a chance. If God would mete out the attribute of justice immediately, if he coalesced the attribute of mercy and partnered it with the attribute of justice, ultimately justice will be served, but it'll be doled over a lifetime. God will give you a chance to repent. And even if you don't repent, you'll have opportunities to do other good things. But ultimately, justice will be served. So it's justice within the context of mercy. It's only the application of justice. But that's how Elokim has relevance to existence. There's nothing superfluous. Very often, Mishlei is Proverbs. And the Malbim, who's a commentator, has a commentary on Mishlei's commentary on the whole Torah, he writes that King Solomon, being who he was, he has to give the equivalent of certain things for us as human beings to appreciate what spirituality is. For instance, the Torah is sweeter than honey. Honey as a substance is nothing sweeter than honey. So if he wants to share with you, to give you an inkling of what the sweetness of Torah is, he says it's as sweet as honey. They're all allegories. They're proverbs. For us to relate to things which are totally abstract, he has to give us the equivalent in the physical to be able to relate, to have a semblance of understanding what the value is. That's what it is. Mesukim dvash. It's sweeter than honey. That's what it is. God created granules of sand. God says to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, your children will be like the sand on the beaches. As you cannot count the sand on the beaches, your children will not be able to be quantified. So why was sand created on the beaches? To hold back the surf. So every time there's a hurricane, they have to replace the sand dunes. That's why God created sand. No, because you understand, if you want to understand how many Jews are going to descend from Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, from the patriarchs, they're going to be like the sand on the beaches. The prophet says that the wisdom of Solomon was like the sand on the beaches. So the Midrash says, what does that mean? What do you mean his wisdom was like the sand of the beaches? So the Midrash says, who's equated to the sand of the beaches? The Jewish people. See, the Midrash says if you take all the Jewish people, all their wisdom, and encapsulate it into one being, and you put Solomon on the other side, he'd outweigh all of them. You understand what his genius was? This is unfathomable genius. You know what the genius of Rebbe Akiva was? What the genius of Reb Meir was? He was called Reb Noroi. They couldn't even begin fathoming who Reb Meir was, who Reb Akiva was. Here we're talking about you take 10,000 Rebbe Akivas, combine them, you put them on one side of the scale, it's not, Solomon is more than all of them. We're talking about unfathomable wisdom. This is divine genius. His wisdom was the equivalent of all the sand of the beaches. So why did God create sand on the beaches? So when Solomon gives you the allegory, now you have a semblance of understanding who King Solomon was, what his genius was. There's a question, first Rashi cites the Midrash. Rabbi Yitzchak asks a question. Why does the Torah start with the history of creation? The Torah should start with the first mitzvah that was given to us as a Jewish people. HaChodesh Zeh Lochem Rosh Chodoshim, the sanctification of the new moon. The first month, the month we left Egypt to become the Jewish people, which was the redemption, was the month of Nisan. HaChodesh Zeh Lochem Rosh Chodoshim. This is the first month. This will be the first of the months to be counted, to be the beginning of the year. So why? Why does the Torah begin with the book of Bereshis, the history of creation? So Rabbi Yitzchak answers, cites a verse in Tehillim, because what are the nations? What's their claim against the Jewish people? You people are marauders, you're interlopers. How did you have a right to drive the 7 nations of Canaan out of Canaan? How did you have a right to drive them out? You're a bunch of thieves. You're a bunch of murderers. How did you do it? So David says in Tehillim, Koach Masov Higid La'amo Losis Lehem Nachlas Goyim. The power of his actions he shared with his people to give them the portion of the nations. So we answer, God created the world. He gives and he takes. Initially, he chose to give it to you, and he took it from you and gave it to us. So it's not we're marauders, we're interlopers. We're a bunch of whatever you want to call us. It's around what you say. We have a divine right to the land. God gave the land to Avram to pass it on to Yitzchak, Yaakov. We being their descendants, it was given to the Jewish people. That's the answer. That's what the Torah gives us, the opening of creation, the history of creation, the creation of the world. God is the creator. He determines who has and who does not have. Okay? So I always ask, you go tell it to the Arabs. In our holy book, it says, they said, we got something else that says differently. The communists say, we don't even believe in God. So what are you selling us, a bill of goods? It's a bunch of nonsense. So what kind of answer is this? Because we're accused of being marauders, being interlopers, being thieves. That's the answer. The answer is, it's not an answer for the world. We have to know for ourselves what our rights. We have rights. Where do those rights come from? They're God-given rights. It's God's to give, to take, and God's to give. And that's our right there. As long as we understand who we are, what we are, our rights to be, we'd have to know more than that. The world will always accuse us, whether you want to call it anti-Semitism, opposed to spirituality, the battle of the forces of good and evil, whatever way you want to depict it and quantify it. It's irrelevant. But that's what it's about. So it's very, very interesting. Now, we find a terrible thing happened in the desert. This is after the sin of the golden calf, which was nearly destroyed the Jewish people. The second year in the desert, all of a sudden the Jews get this crazy idea. God says the land I will take you into will be a land that flows with milk and honey. It's a land, the houses are filled with all kinds of wealth and goodness. The Jews say, before we go into the land, we like to send scouts. We'd like to send spies. So God says to Moshe, look, I told him what it's all about. It's a land that flows, what do they have to send spies? But if they want to, I don't encourage it, but I allow it. So what happened? This was the beginning of the end. It was disastrous. The spies, 10 of the 12 spies come back with ominous reports. It's a land that devours its inhabitants. It's disastrous. God wants to destroy us. It's a land of giants. Okay? What happens? The majority of the people, they accept the reading of the 10 spies, not the 2 was Kalev and Yeshua. They reject theirs. God says, it's over. This generation will not see the promised land. They will perish over this 40-year period. They're not going into the land. The future generations are going in. And all tragedies emanated because it says they cried a baseless crying. That's what happened. And that night was Tisha B'Av night. When we bemoaned our fate, It's like a person gets $1 billion lottery prize, and the guy's bemoaning the fact he has to pay tax. You understand? You just won $1 billion. You're bemoaning that you have to pay tax. Before you won, you had nothing. Now you have everything. You got to pay tax. You know something? There's something wrong with you. God says it's a land that flows with milk and honey. Oh, it's a land that devours its inhabitants. Don't you realize you're reading it wrong? Instead of saying the glass 3/4 full, you say, but it's partially empty. Yeah, but look at what's below that little emptiness. It's full. But people don't see it. And that's the way it is. Now, if the Jews would have never sent spies, you know what would have happened? So there's a beautiful word from the Orach Chaim HaKodesh. God says to Moshe, Shlach l'cha anoshim. You could send the spies, but it's your decision. I'm allowing it. To the land that I gave to the Jewish people. We're talking about the spies are going to that land. That's what they requested. To Canaan, the land that I gave to the Jewish people. What is it? What does it have to mention that? So the Orach Chaim HaKodesh says something phenomenal. Humanly, it was impossible to conquer Canaan. Impossible. Why? It's a land of giants. But if a person is a benefactor, endowing a gift, and he says, I will deliver the real estate tenant-free. Right now, the building is occupied with tenants. So the one who's going to receive the gift in 12 months says, but it's full with tenants. So the benefactor says, I said it will be delivered tenant-free. I'm the gifter. It's tenant-free. But the giants, God says, what's the problem? Guaranteed, I will clear the land. No giants. You will not have any obstacles. No impediments. You're going straight in. You walk in, these people just fall dead. That's what's going to happen. You know something? If the Jews would have fully comprehended what God said to Moshe, spies is not a problem. God will remove the spies. Giants is not a problem. Nothing's a problem. But they didn't believe that God would do it, or it didn't resonate with them. Therefore, they said it's a land that devours its inhabitants. So now, why are we accused of being marauders and interlopers? Because we conquered the land. We had to go in conventionally. We conquered the land. So what is the world saying? You people are a bunch of thieves. You're a bunch of gangsters. But let's say we wouldn't have sent spies. Could the world accuse us of being interlopers, being marauders? We walked in, the giants just fell dead. God just swept the whole terrain. It has nothing to do with us. It's clear God gave us the land. But because we failed, therefore there's an accusation. Therefore, because of our failing, God knowing our failing, the Torah has to begin with the history of creation. It's God's to give and it's God's to take. And that's for us to know, not for the world. The world couldn't care less. They'll come with all their accusations and whatever they have to say, with all their anti-Semitic claims against us. Doesn't make a difference. So that's part of the Chil Hashem. The Chil Hashem, we speak of desecrating God's name, is due to our behavior. Why is there anti-Semitism in the world? Why was the Beis HaMikdash destroyed? Why was it not forever? Because we failed. Because we violated 3 cardinal sins. Because there was unwarranted hate, baseless hate. So all the exile, and the Jews are killed, Holocaust, pogroms, displacements. Why did these things happen? With chosen people, we say, if they're the chosen people, why is God mistreating them? Why is he allowing his people to be decimated? Evidently, it's not so simple. Either God reneged, God forbid, or who knows what. But who's the cause of all this misinterpretation and the distortion of truth? We're the cause of it. But if we would have told the line and acted and had sufficient faith, it would have been obvious to the world, we're God's people. God does our bidding because we're doing what he wants. And that's the way it would have been. So the only reason why we have the history of creation to address this claim against us is only because of the sin of the spies. If we wouldn't have sent spies, there's not even a consideration to be accused that we did anything wrong. It's interesting. What's the reason why the Jews went to Egypt? Why did we go to Egypt? Because Avraham Avinu had asked the question. What happened in Egypt? Yaakov goes to Egypt with his 70 members of his family, and then the Jews proliferate there. The first generation passes on. The Jews become idolaters. We sank to a level of spiritual impurity, as I mentioned before. The 49th level, we were at the brink of going to the oblivion. We became putrefied with impurity. We were supposed to be there 400 years. We were there only 210 years. We were not fully purged of the impurity of Egypt. And because we were not fully purged from the impurity of Egypt, you know what had to be? We had to experience 4 exiles. And we're still experiencing the 4th of the exiles. Right now, we're in the middle of the Edomite exile. It's called Golus Edom, who destroyed the second Beis Hamikdash. And we're not finished yet. It's more than 2,000 years. But all that is a derivative of the impurity of Egypt. That's why we keep having our setbacks. Because we couldn't stay there more than 210 years because we wouldn't have survived it. And therefore, we're still enduring these exiles. When God created the world, the Torah depicts, before things took on a perfect formation, a formed context, it says, the world was tohu vavohu, was unformed, was chaotic, v'choshech al pnei sahom. So the Midrash says, tohu is Golus Bavel. That's the Babylonian exile. Vohu, that's Haman. That's Persia. With the Jews, the decree was given to annihilate every man, woman, and child. Choshech, that's Golus Yovan. That's the Greek exile, where they had decreed, they had blackened the eyes of the Jewish people with their decrees. Tahom, that's the deep waters. That's Edom, meaning there's no end to this exile. It's like the depths of the ocean. There's no end to it. This exile, there's no end to it. It's over 2,000 years. The Spirit of God is hovering over the water. Is Ruach Shel Mashiach. That's the Spirit of Mashiach. And what's Al Pnei Amoyim? It's contingent on the Jews doing tshuva. Because Yirmiyah writes in Eicha, Shivchi kamayam libech. When your hearts will gush forth with tears, which is a derivative of tshuva, Mashiach will come. So the 4 exiles already alluded to at the very beginning of creation. That's part and parcel. This has to happen, has to unfold, has to evolve. Because we can only achieve the ultimate level of perfection only if we experience those 4 exiles. But why? Because Avram asked the question. Therefore, we had to go to Egypt. But we meant to be there 400 years, but we couldn't survive. Therefore, it has to be 4 exiles. So all those 4 exiles were included within creation, that the dynamic was set in place for them to come about at certain moments to be able for us to experience them and ultimately be worthy of becoming a Mashiach, and that's when the world will achieve its level of perfection. To be continued.
Rabbi, thank you.
Be well.